It's Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, which drops on Mondays and Thursdays at 6 a.m. Jeff Mosher and this man, Adam Caplan, is with me right now. I want to ask Adam, last hour, our discussion and carryover. I want to get his opinion on this. Adam Caplan, welcome back, pal. How are you?
I'm well, my friend. Looking forward to going to Eagles practice for the first time this year until we get to training camp tomorrow.
All right. We're looking forward to that. Now, real quick, there was a social media question from Barstool asking the most iconic play. I said there's only one answer.
Oh.
Philadelphia sports. It's the Brandon Graham strip sack, right?
It is, man. That and people say I'm biased. I don't think so. That is not only the best Super Bowl. I don't know if there was a better sporting event other than maybe, and I should have been to that game, the Kentucky Duke game, which was at the Spectrum, the regional final in the NCAA Tournament, 93 was it, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around there?
Yes, it's in the early part of the 90s. I know our own Pete Thompson was at that game. That's one of his claims to fame.
I was supposed to. Oh, Pete was, yeah, I was supposed to be there. That's another story for another time. You won't believe why I missed that game. I actually had tickets secured. But, I would say, I was at the strip sack.
So I guess there's a split between the Philly and the strip sack. Which play is – and somebody texted in. This was interesting. The Jake Elliott 61-yard field goal, because if they don't win that game, then they don't get the number one seed and they have to go to Minnesota.
Yeah, but you have to – I mean, you could say, what was the most important play, Mike, leading up to the playoffs? Well, that kick, you could say, was it. It just – so many things happened in that season, Mike, which –
Pederson's interception, Patrick Pederson.
Yeah, I'll tell you a quick story. So myself, Sean Landetta, the former Eagles punter, and Andrew Brandt flew home the night before the Super Bowl. We were all flying back from Minnesota. I typically, if I don't work the game, I go home and watch the game. So – Sean made the point, and I agree with him. He gave credit to the Eagles, to be clear, but he did say that it's amazing how much went right. And I laughed. I said, yeah, let's look at Patrick Robinson.
What is it, Pederson?
Patrick Robinson was terrible for the first 2 weeks of training camp. Looked like he wound up having a great season. Who could have predicted that? And don't forget J.J. They made the trade with the Dolphins. Why? Because they were in training camp with him in Philly when Miami came in. I mean, if you looked at every single free agency move that Howie Roseman made, Mike, I mean, you hate to say anything is perfect because no one ever does a perfect job, but it seems like everything went right that season.
Right, and another play that's huge in that game, by the way, that kind of gets lost in the sauce because the Eagles are down in that game 33-32, and then they go on a 14-play, 75-yard touchdown. The Ertz play where he dives into the end zone, the diving nature of him doing that is so memorable, but it ends up kind of being lost in the sauce because of some of these other plays that happened in the game.
Mike, and remember, the old rule, because if you recall, the old rule was, the super old rule is all you had to do is break the plane, and it's a touchdown. It didn't matter if the ball comes loose. Then they changed the rule. And that's why when I think Collinsworth and Al Michaels talked about it, they weren't sure if that was a touchdown.
Right. Yep.
And I was like, here we go. Is that going to be a touchdown? And it was. It just, in my lifetime, I can remember the Sixers 82-83, the faux, the Moses Malone phrase, and that was a great run. But in terms of Philadelphia sports and greatness, and everything that had to go right, and we understand it's an Eagles town. I get that growing up here. But everything that happened that year, you just could not make it up. And the other thing is Nick Foles, out of nowhere, plays not only the two best game of his life, I don't know that anyone's ever played a better Super Bowl game than other than maybe Tom Brady. And, of course, Nick Foles saves it for that game.
Right, and it's funny because Adam Caplan's with us, Football at 4. We looked back at the video of the Brandon Graham strip sack, and what makes it even more iconic is that the camera pans to Brady sitting on the carpet in just total disbelief because there's 2 minutes and 16 seconds left. They're going to take the lead in that game, the way that game was going. And Michael said it's the only sack of the game. And that's why that play stands out, is the camera getting Brady, right? And
who said on the sideline, because remember, NFL Films had it, was it Doug Pederson who said, "I need whatever you got, whatever." He said something like that because they needed a pass rush.
Yep.
It's just, again, what were the chances everything would come? And don't forget, do you remember Foles against Atlanta? He didn't play very well. The first playoff game, they almost lost. He looked bad against the Raiders, filling in for Wentz. That's what made their Super Bowl run so improbable. So much went right. Obviously, let's give the coaches and players credit. But so much had to go right. I mean, they literally had no margin for error.
Well, you know what else? Somebody tweeted at me and said, typical Eagles. They only have one Super Bowl, so they have to pick 10 plays from one game. I said, you could win 7 Super Bowls, and that strip sack would still be the best play because of the way that game was and who you got. The fact that it's Brady and Belichick, because the camera goes from Brady, and then it goes over to Belichick, who has this look on his face of complete disbelief of, I can't believe we are going to lose this game.
Mike, let me add something to what you just said. So I was asked, as we all were, who are you picking? I said, I'm picking the Patriots. The only way that the Eagles will win is if Pederson outcoaches Belichick. Guess what? He did. He outcoached Belichick.
Right. Unbelievable.
And Matt Patricia, who was then the defense coordinator.
And that's why, you can make a case for the Philly special play because it was right before the half, and it kind of set the tone for the aggressiveness of the rest of the game. But the strip sack has to be at the top of the list.
And the funny thing about the Philly play is that I hosted an event with Zach Ertz, and Zach said that the play was supposed to be a run play. Really? The real call was supposed to be a run play. Think about that.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
so
there's
a nugget.
Yep, Thuzio, here's what happened. So I was hosting his charity event for Thuzio, and it was in my questions. I said, hey, Zach, what was the play? And he was laughing. He goes, I don't think we should have. He was laughing. He's like, well, it was a run play. He didn't say exactly what it was. And he was laughing. He goes, I think we made the right choice not to run that.
Unbelievable.
And they tweeted it out. And
I've never heard that before. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. How about that one?
That's pretty crazy. So they had a play that they were going to call, and Foles kind of upstages them.
Yeah, and again, we had John DeFilippo on Inside the Birds with Mosher and I, and we'll ask John next time we have him on if he recalls what the play was. Because obviously he was on the headset as a quarterback's coach. Really, just everything that happened in that game, and the craziness of everything that had happened. And one more nugget from that game. Remember, you correct me if I'm wrong. I know it's most yardage in playoff history. Was it most yardage in any game in NFL history? I can't remember.
In that Super Bowl,
1,100 something.
I'll have to look.
Yeah, it was over 1,100. I know that combined for both teams. I just couldn't remember. It set a playoff record, but I wasn't sure if it was the most in NFL history. But I know it was the most in playoff history. That's how crazy it was.
What a trip down memory lane that became. Yeah. Good stuff.
Very cool.
Speaking of calling plays, let's get into that. Shane Steichen mentioned last week. We talked about it on Football at 4. He casually threw in that he started calling plays. So let's get into that. The impact of Steichen and calling the plays and how that might make this offense look different.
Yeah, I'm glad we brought this up because we only touched it on passing because we didn't have enough time to talk about it last Friday, Mike. So here's why they're doing it based on what I've heard. If you look at Jalen Hurts' career, one of the things he struggled with is continuity. If you look at what happened, remember he transferred from Alabama to Oklahoma. He didn't really have the same play caller going back 8 to 10 years, and that's really significant for such a young football player. We're not making excuses. Clearly he didn't play well enough last year. That's what the tape showed. But if you want to be fair to him, at least keep him in the same offense with the same play caller. Well, we know they're going to run the same scheme. Now, how much they run versus pass is certainly in question. They're going to pass more, but how much more is the question. But number two, and very important, how about keeping the same play caller? So Steichen, and I still don't know why he came out with that. I think Jeff McClain asked a question, and he goes, well, last year around midseason I called the plays, and I'm going to call them this year, which means full time. It's just my sense, like they want to keep the continuity going. And another thing that people forget, Shane Steichen called the plays 2 years ago for Justin Herbert's rookie season. He did a good job. And the other part of it is he actually took over in 2019 when Ken Whisenhunt was fired as the Chargers OC. Mm-hmm. And this is the first time that Steichen took over, called plays at the NFL level. So he had basically roughly a season and a half plus last year. So this is a good move, and what I've heard is, I know he comes off as very plain and mundane in press conferences. I get that. I've kind of said that. Most people have. But behind the scenes, he's very vocal and has very good command in meetings. So I think that's something people were kind of criticizing for being very boring. What I'm told, Mike, not behind the scenes.
I like the, as you mentioned, is the whole Hurts getting a chance now to have the same play caller. You wonder how much that factored in. Or, did Sirianni just get overwhelmed by, hey, I can't be the best head coach? Because that happens to these guys sometimes, yeah. Adam, is they can't be the head coach. And there was a lot of discussion about this, Doug, early in his career. Was there too much on his plate, calling all the plays? Can you not be the best head coach if you're calling plays? Can you not divert your attention to other areas where it needs to be?
Well, a couple things, Mike, on that. So Joe Banner told us on Inside the Birds, Joe, the former president of the Eagles, said that while it had been reported maybe a couple times over the years that Andy handed off play calling, Joe said Andy handed off the play calling to Marty Mornhinweg or whoever his offense coordinator was. It could have been Brad Childress. So many times over the years that it never got reported. He can't even remember how many times. Like, it could have been a couple dozen times. And it's to the point that you brought up. One time remember when Jim Washburn was having issues with Juan Castillo? I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
2011,
Absolutely.
I think. So Andy wanted to basically what I remember, Andy wanted to get a better hold of the defense, because they were struggling, obviously. Giving Juan Castillo the defensive coordinator responsibilities after coming out of lockout was a mistake. And Jim Washburn was having issues. He didn't really respect Juan as a DC, and Andy wanted to get a better hold of it. So he handed off the play calling responsibilities because he wanted to get a better hold. And then most recently, last year, not only the Eagles, Matt Nagy, the then Bears head coach, handed off the play calling responsibilities to Bill Lazor for the second straight season because he just was not. This is a little different. He said, listen, it's not working for me being the play caller. Let's give it to somebody else. But the problem is when you do it in season, Mike, you have to run the exact scheme. You can't change it up in season.
Sure.
So the whole thing is smart, though, by Sirianni. And on your point, remember now, after 5 weeks, the Eagles were a top 5 pass attempt team. By the end of the season, they were bottom 10 because they became a running team, and that happened with Steichen calling the plays. Now, I do believe, though, to be clear here, Sirianni wanted that. It was not coming from above, because it was not working asking Hurts to throw the ball 34.5 times per game through the first 6 games.
Okay, real quick, just while you brought it up. There are a ton of Philadelphia sports stories that could have a 30 for 30, but Andy Reid's decision to make Juan Castillo the defensive coordinator has to be high on that list.
Can I tell you so this is a funny story. So it's funny. It's just, everything you brought up today, it's not in our rundown. You just, as you know, I'm fine with you throw stuff at me, and I love it because I get to jog my mind of where I was and what happened, what do I remember. So I was traveling when Andy announced it. I might have been at the Super Bowl. Or whatever it was, I was not around to be at NovaCare when he talked about it. So Andy and I flew, every once in a while we'd be on the same flight to the owners' meetings or the combine. And it was either one of them. I said, Coach, hey, I wasn't there. Could you give me an idea of what you're thinking? And he explained it to me, and I did understand what he was looking at. Because Juan, as an offensive line coach, though he did coach defense in college at Texas A&I, Juan had not coached defense in a couple decades. But he thought that, hey, listen, of all the guys that I talked to, Juan was the one guy who could break down an offensive line because he coached it. Now, I know there are some people in the league thought Andy was crazy to do this coming out of lockout, and the guys that coached defense in 20-some years, why would you do this now? And it obviously turned out to be a mistake. But just hearing Andy's explanation, I kind of bought it. Obviously, I was wrong. But when a guy is there every day, you got to trust his judgment. But it isn't amazing how I think anyone who covered the team will tell you Andy lost his fastball with the Eagles, and I'm not going to run away from it. I was on record saying he needs to go. He just needs to go. He needs to leave and go somewhere else. And guess what? That new lease on life and new energy was the best thing for him, and look how brilliant he's been since then.
All right, Adam Caplan, Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. The new podcast will drop on Thursday at 6. Got Q&A. Check that out on their Inside the Birds platform. Excellent show from those guys. Let's look at these OTAs. Give me maybe your 3 thoughts from OTAs, what we've got so far.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about this Thursday because Jeff and I will be there. and then plus we'll check in with our sources and take an overview. But I know the media's not got much of a chance, as you know, Mike, to be at training camp. OTAs, because that's just kind of the way the rules are now, because Eagles are not doing a mandatory camp. But from what I understand, Hurts definitely has looked better. Now, I know people are making a big deal about the accuracy, which I kind of laugh in OTAs because you're not being blitzed. 7-on-7, which is primarily what they're running, is a passing drill, so you should do well. But from what I understand, his mechanics are cleaner. And that is one issue, Mike, that was significant last season. His mechanics were not good enough. Footwork were not good enough, not always set, would fall away from throws, needs to get his feet set. So everything I've heard so far it's been better. But again, Mike, the OTAs are so light, and there's very little you can do. Let's not go crazy with saying the accuracy is better. Yeah, I mean, you should mention it, but that's good. They're rotating the backup corners a lot. That number 3 outside corner job it should be McPherson's, but from what I understand is they're rotating there a little bit. And the COB Dean, another one. It doesn't really mean anything that Dean's running third team. He's learning the defense. He'll be starting this season, Mike. You know, they're basically a two linebacker defense anyway. Or when they go, their base is not the way other teams do it. We know that their strong side linebacker will strictly be a pass rusher, and he'll no longer be a run defender. We know that Reddick's just going to rush the passer. But when they play the 2 tackling linebackers, Dean will be one of them. Let's call it like it is. I just kind of laugh when people make light of, oh my God, he's third string linebacker. Well, yeah, he's got to learn the defense. Right. First time he's seen this defense before.
So we got the linebackers. We're all going to be keeping an eye on that. Obviously, Hurts. Nick Sirianni, he mentioned about the mechanics of Jalen Hurts. He had talked to Sal Powell about that and said that was the big thing they want to watch for Jalen Hurts. And then the defense. I think there's so many storylines, as you mentioned. And then one of the biggest stories of this offseason is all of the front office changes as we roll into these last OTAs here. Do we finally have that in place?
Yeah, and let me just, we don't have 20 minutes here, so let's sum this up in a minute. It's still going to be Howie Roseman making decisions. That's never been a question. But it's how they arrive at making a personnel decision. Analytics will be heavily, they've always been involved, but it's going to be even more so. And that's why Alec Halaby is one of their assistant GMs. They've made over 20 front office changes. This includes promotions and people leaving and so forth. But I know people think there's some nefarious reasons. I don't see it that way. They're rewarding people who've been there for a while, are very talented. They brought in Brandon Hunt from Pittsburgh. He doesn't have the job that he originally interviewed for, but it's still for a pretty good job. He's a very odd title. And as we said forever on Inside the Birds, don't pay attention to the titles. If you're just studying it, pay attention to what these people actually do. And Howie, what he did was, I still think they should have more football people. We're talking about people who played. But I like that Dave Caldwell got promoted, the former Jaguars GM, who's Howie's known for a long time, and Matt Russell, who's a very talented evaluator, who Howie brought back. He used to be with the Eagles over a decade ago. So that's good. But I'm still going to keep an eye on when these decisions, how much are they analytically driven, because they've done such a good job of combining analytics and tape study the last 2 years. But with Alec Halaby, who's one of their assistant GMs, getting more of a say, I'm very curious how this is going to work.
All right, a lot of changes. By the way, was Caldwell the GM of the team that went to the AFC Championship game?
He was in 2017. Now here's the thing. Tom Coughlin, remember he took over the director of football operations, and Coughlin had personnel control then, but Dave also drafted a lot of those good players that they still have, and that's the point.
Gotcha. All right. Adam Caplan, good conversation, a little trip down memory lane.
Yeah, awesome.
Some good jogging the memory there, and some good stories from Adam. Check out the Inside the Birds podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcast. It'll drop Thursday morning at 6 a.m., and Adam's back on Friday with nuggets from OTAs. All right, pal.
Thank you.
All right, Adam Caplan here on the Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN.